The man on every bottle of Jack Daniels didn't invent the whiskey, an orphan, a farm. Decades later, his name sells more American whiskey than anyone else on earth, but the recipe, someone else built it. A man who was enslaved, a man erased from the label for 150 years. You've probably held a bottle of this, maybe poured it at a wedding, a bar, a barbecue. Maybe you know the label by heart, the swinging bridge logo, the block lettering. The year 1866 printed under Jack's name like a founding myth. What's never printed anywhere on that bottle is the name of the man who actually knew how to make it. Not the marketing version, the real one. Here it comes. Jasper Newton Daniel, born 1849, rural Tennessee, youngest of 10. His mother died right after he arrived. His father remarried, went to fight in the Civil War and never came home. Orphaned before 10, nothing to lose. So he ran, away from a stepmother he couldn't stand and away from a house that never felt like his. He drifted between relatives for a while. None of it stuck. Eventually, he landed with a preacher named Dan Call who needed a hand around the farm and didn't ask too many questions about where the kid had come from. Farmhand work, chores for a bed, should have been a dead end for a 10-year-old with no family and no prospects. Except Dan Call didn't just preach on Sundays. 6 days a week, in a hollow behind his property, he ran a still. Here's what the label leaves out. Dan Call didn't make the whiskey. A man he owned, and later paid, did. Nathan Green. They called him Nearest. He wasn't helping around the still, he was running it. Nearest had learned a method passed down through enslaved distillers, one that traced back to African charcoal filtering traditions carried across the Atlantic and refined generation after generation in kitchens and stills that history never bothered to record. Run the whiskey through hard sugar maple charcoal before it ever sees a barrel. Today we call it the Lincoln County process. It's the whole reason Jack Daniels tastes like Jack Daniels, and no one wrote down who taught it to whom, because nobody thought it was worth writing down. A preacher owned the still on paper. Nearest owned it in every way that mattered. He could have ignored the scrawny kids circling the mash barrels. He didn't. Day after day, he taught him the sour mash, the charcoal, the timing, the patience of barrel demands. Small things too, things you can't rush. How the char smells when it's ready, how the drip should sound, when to wait another hour and when waiting ruins it. Slowly, without anyone deciding it should happen, the boy with nothing became the only outsider who knew the whole process cold. Then, the war ended. Nearest was free. Free, but not funded. Freedom didn't hand him a business, just a choice, and no guarantee anyone in Tennessee would let him use it. So in 1875, when Jack Daniel finally scraped together his own distillery, he made a call almost nobody in the post-war South was making. He hired Nearest Green, paid him, named him Master Distiller, the first one Jack Daniels ever had. 2 of Nearest's sons joined the crew, then a 3rd generation of Greens after them. But 1870s, Tennessee ran on its own rules. Nearest could run the stills. He could train every distiller who came after him. He'd never be the face on the bottle. In 1904, that whiskey won a gold medal at the World's Fair in St. Louis, up against spirits from around the globe. Newspapers wrote it up as a triumph of Tennessee craftsmanship. Not one of them mentioned the black master distiller whose process had made that medal possible. For the next 150 years, that's exactly how it stayed. Jack Daniel died in 1911. Infection, the legend says, from kicking a safe he'd forgotten the combination to. He'd already handed the company to his nephew. The whiskey kept moving, through Prohibition, through 2 wars, into every bar and country song in America. Meanwhile, the Green name got quieter every decade. Quiet, not gone. His descendants kept working that same distillery in Lynchburg, generation after generation. Well over 100 combined years of Green family labor behind those same walls, long after the tour guides had stopped mentioning him at all. Then, 2016. A journalist named Fawn Weaver reads a New York Times piece that finally says it out loud. She doesn't stop at reading. She moves to Lynchburg, finds descendants on both sides, Green and Daniel in Motlow, and sits with them, digs through property records, plantation ledgers, employment rolls. Nobody had touched in a century, piecing together a paper trail that history had scattered on purpose. What she builds from all of it is Uncle Nearest Premium Whiskey, his name finally on a label. Today, it's one of the largest black-owned spirits companies in the country, and Nearest's own descendants work there too, only now with their family's name printed where the world can see it. I'll be honest with you, the first time I read this, something in me recalibrated. You grow up seeing that black label, that stern portrait, and you assume the bottle already told you everything. It didn't. It doesn't. Most bottles don't. Walk through Lynchburg today and you'll find a statue that wasn't there 20 years ago. Nearest Green finally standing in bronze on the property where he once stood over a mash barrel with no one writing his name down. It's a small thing, a statue. It's also everything, if you're the family that waited 5 generations for it. And here's the angle worth sitting with. Everyone wants to tell this as Orphan makes good. The American dream bottled. Easy story, wrong one. The real question is who gets remembered and who gets erased when history only has room for one name. Jack Daniel didn't steal the credit. He paid Nearest, titled him, at a time that was almost unheard of. The erasure came later, slower, quieter. 150 years of marketing decisions and a country that wasn't ready to put a black master distiller's face on a bottle sold in all 50 states. No single villain here. No one moment you can point to and say, that's where it went wrong. Just a system that kept deciding quietly year after year whose name got to survive on a shelf and whose name got filed away in a plantation ledger instead. That's the part that should stay with you longer than the trivia does. Not just that Nearest Green existed. Plenty of people know that now. It's how ordinary the erasure was. No conspiracy required. Just 150 years of nobody bothering to ask the obvious question, who actually taught Jack Daniel how to make whiskey? So, back to where we started. The man on the bottle didn't invent the whiskey. An orphan learned a craft from a man who wasn't free to put his own name on it. And when that orphan finally got the chance to build something of his own, he did the one thing his era rarely allowed. He put his teacher on the payroll, even if the world wouldn't put him on the label. That choice mattered. It just wasn't enough on its own to survive 150 years of a country deciding whose story got told. It took descendants who kept showing up to work anyway. It took a journalist willing to knock on doors instead of just citing a footnote. It took a family finally getting to say a name out loud that they'd been saying quietly at home for 5 generations. Nearest Green made the whiskey. Jack Daniel made it famous. Now you know both names. If a story like this deserves 5 minutes of your time, it deserves you sharing it too.